7 months learning, 5 months trading, a full year of my life poured into one thing. You know what I walked away with? 4 rules. Not a system, not a comprehensive toolkit. 4 rules I could run in about an hour a week that produced a result I could count on. For a while, I thought that was a failure. A whole year, and all I had to show for it was something small enough to write on an index card. Eventually, I understood it was the entire point. Most people have mastery backwards. They think it's the accumulation of complexity, more knowledge, more technique, more credentials, more years stacked on top of each other until you finally look like an expert. That's not mastery. That's expertise in its performance costume. Real mastery is the opposite move. It's the capacity to produce a consistent, reliable result through the simplest version of a process that actually works. Run with enough repetition that it becomes who you are instead of something you have to force. Mastery was the 4 rules. The 1 hour, the same outcome week after week, whether or not the motivation showed up that particular Tuesday. The learning, the trading, the months of stepping back afterward, the eventual return. None of that was the path to mastery. It was mastery. The distillation was the work. What I had at the end wasn't less than what I started with. It was more precise, more usable, more mine. You're not trying to collect more. You're trying to boil it down to the smallest thing that still works. So why do most people never get there? It's not talent. It's not intelligence. It's not even time. It's 4 patterns that interrupt the compounding before it can pay off. 1, they try to improve everything at once. Learning and doing run at the same time, and neither gets the focus that actually builds a skill. 2, they pick intensity over consistency. The 2 weeks of 4 in the morning sessions instead of the sustainable 5 a.m. practice that holds for months. Intensity gives you a spike, then a crash. Consistency compounds, and it doesn't need fresh emotional fuel every time because the habit has taken over from the decision. 3, they want the results before they've done the time the results require. The first 90 days of any real skill are the hardest, and they show the least. That's exactly where people quit. Not because the skill isn't developing, but because it isn't developing fast enough to feel like it's working. 4, they lean on passive learning, watching, reading, consuming. Necessary, but not enough. You don't develop a skill by learning about it. You develop it by doing it, being wrong about it, adjusting, and doing it again. Every one of those patterns is the same thing wearing a disguise. Impatience dressed up as strategy. Here's the math everybody nods at and nobody feels. Improve by 1% a day, not 20%, not 10%, just 1%. As James Clear popularized in Atomic Habits, 1% better every day for a year doesn't get you 365% better. It gets you roughly 3,700% because each day compounds on the one before it. The curve doesn't look like anything until it does, all at once, in a way that stuns everyone who wasn't watching the process underneath it. And here's the brutal part. 1% is invisible in the moment. You can't feel it on a Tuesday. The mirror looks the same. The work feels the same. And the thought that arrives right on schedule is, this isn't working. It is working. You can't see it yet. That's the whole emotional test of mastery. Trusting the math on the days the math gives you nothing back. So how do you actually run a 1%? 4 elements. They don't go in order. They run together. Element 1, micro practice. The daily minimum viable dose. Not the session you do on a perfect day with no obligations and unlimited time. The session you can do on any day. The busy ones. The hard ones. The days you want nothing to do with it. 15 minutes of writing. 20 minutes of real language practice. 1 financial review of the week's spending, done with attention instead of avoidance. The floor, not the ceiling. Because 15 focused minutes done daily, without gaps, accumulates into something that longer, scattered practice never touches. The habit removes the decision. You stop negotiating about whether today's the day. It is. Settled. Element 2, focused feedback. Practice without feedback isn't improvement, it's repetition. And repetition alone builds habit, sometimes the wrong technique drilled in so deep it's harder to fix than it was to learn. Feedback tells you where the gap is, specifically, Not that didn't go well. That's useless. I lost the thread in the third paragraph and never recovered it. That you can act on. The question you carry into every session isn't, was that good? It's what do I adjust in the next rep? Element 3. Learning sprints. A 2 to 6 week window aimed at one specific component of a skill. Not the whole skill. One part. Get better at writing is too big to act on. 2-week sprint on opening paragraphs, one that you can build your practice around, ask for feedback on, and measure. The sprint creates structure where free-form practice creates drift. Element 4, consistency systems. The system carries the practice when motivation doesn't show up, which is often, which is fine if the system's built. A fixed time, a dedicated space that primes the state before you've started, an X on the calendar for every day you show up, until breaking the chain feels like something worth protecting. The system outlasts the motivation. That's the only way anything compounds. Mastery doesn't feel linear from the inside. It feels like 4 phases. And knowing which one you're in is the difference between surviving it and quitting in it. Phase 1 is the struggle. Low skill, high resistance, slow feedback, visible mistakes. The constant temptation to read the slow progress as proof the skill isn't for you. Instead of proof, you're in phase 1 of something that takes time. This is where most people stop. The 1% method keeps the daily commitment small enough to survive it. Phase 2 is the build. Skill climbs slowly but visibly. The mistakes get fewer and more specific. Confidence grows, not the loud kind from early enthusiasm, the earned kind from someone who can feel the difference between where they started and where they are now. Phase 3 is the breakthrough. Something clicks. The thing you were consciously forcing starts running on its own. People look back and call this, suddenly it came together. It wasn't sudden. It was every phase 1 and phase 2 day that came before it. Phase 4 is the acceleration, the skill compounds. Practice stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like something you enjoy. The identity has updated. You're not someone trying to learn this. You're someone who does this. Your only job, walking into anything new, is to survive phase 1. The method makes that possible. The rest follows. There's a moment in consistent practice when the language shifts. You stop saying, I'm trying to get better at this. You start saying, I'm getting better at this. Small change in wording, big change in what it reflects. The first is aspirational, a state you haven't reached. The second is observational, something you can watch happening, grounded in the practice that's producing it. That shift from aspiration to observation is the identity shift. The skill stops being something you're acquiring and becomes something you are. And it transfers. The person who proved to themselves they can survive phase 1 and grind through phase 2 carries that proof into the next skill and the next. The method stops being a technique. It becomes a self-concept. That's what freedom looks like on the inside. Real capability built by your own consistent effort. Nobody gave it to you. Nobody can take it. A full year of my life shrank to 4 rules. For a while that felt like loss. It was the opposite. It was the smallest repeatable version of the thing that worked. And it was mine. You don't need more. You need 1% daily long enough for the math to do what the math does. Next Monday, why a skill you built so deeply it stopped feeling like a skill is still paying you decades later. And the move almost nobody makes to turn quiet competence into actual leverage. If this hit home, the free first chapter and the companion workbook are at the unrestrictedlife.com/chapter. I'll see you next week.